Morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our Commissioner Status Update meeting. Today's date is September 2, 2025. The time is 10 a.m. In attendance are Commissioners Eberline, Duncan, and Matari. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Public comment? Hearing none. We will move into our first item. It's the Historic Preservation Commission America 250 Program grant funding for July 4th Courthouse celebration. And we have Courtney Beebe with us.
Good morning, Commissioners. So I'm here to introduce the newest opportunity to participate in the celebration of the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence. It appears that there is a new grant program. Thank you, Commissioner Duncan, for bringing this to our attention. Last year, we were awarded an America 250 grant. That grant was canceled statewide. They've reformulated the grant program. They're now offering a $2,500 grant to put on some kind of an event, parade, or celebration of the American Revolution on July 4th, 2026. So our question to the commissioners is, are you interested in the Historic Preservation Commission applying for this grant? And if so, how would you like us to use it? Just a little background, we already have an event planned on July 4th. We will be celebrating the centennial of the Kootenai County Courthouse. It was built in 1926, so we are celebrating that 100-year anniversary anyway. In our current budget, we have funding for some decorations and advertising. We also have 2 speakers that are committed, but that's as far as we've gotten. So we were wondering what your input would be on applying for the America 250 grant to enhance that celebration. The money is state funded through the state treasurer's office. So it was appropriated funds from the state legislature. It is awarded through the state treasurer's office.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I think if it can enhance what you've already planned, I think that would be beneficial. And then I guess you're going to get quite a draw if you can do enough advertising, because that's where the parade route ends. And so that would be pretty good to have banners, signs, whatever, to funnel people over there.
I agree. This could be a very large event. I will be honest, there's 6 of us on the Historic Preservation Commission, and we are going to be working on a number of our other projects. It would be, I think, helpful if we had leadership from county elected officials. So if there's someone who would like to guide us in putting on a more structured event than we had anticipated planning, it would be helpful to do that. A couple ideas we have for the funding. There is actually a time capsule underneath the cornerstone of the current historic building. It's never been opened. Might be fun to open it.
Why, yeah.
We may think about putting our own time capsule to join the one that's there. A number of communities will be marking the event by placing murals, art, structures to commemorate the event. One county is actually going to be reproducing the Declaration in a stone format or quotes from it. So those are some other ideas. We'd really invite, I think, more input from the county elected officials on what you'd like to do. It's not due until December 31st, so there is time to formulate a plan, maybe gather ideas from some of our long-standing employees, just a few ideas that we have.
Commissioner Eberline.
Cost and whatnot.
We can only apply for $2,500 max. Used to be 25,000, now it's 2,500. We have a budget to cover everything we need to for our commission for the year, which we thank you for approving. There's no cost to apply. We can write the grant like we usually write grants, so no county time or staff time.
Good.
Food for thought. I would like to check back in maybe in a month to see if you've come up with some ideas, or if there's a volunteer maybe from the county that could help guide us in putting on the event.
Okay.
Would this be in conjunction with next year's 4th of July?
It would be on the 4th of July next year, yes. The way I understand the way the grant was reformulated is they specifically want the money used to celebrate on July 4th. So they want counties, cities, nonprofits to celebrate the American Revolution on July 4th next year and use the funding for that.
Yeah, it's part of the grant requirements as you collaborate with cities and community members. So,
I understand the city of Coeur d'Alene is going to be applying for the grant as well, their Historic Preservation Commission. The Museum of North Idaho is putting on a gala at the end of June next year before the 4th of July to celebrate the American Revolution. So just I think our surrounding communities are also going to apply. Spirit Lake, Post Falls, Harrison, they also will be celebrating in their own way. I think that's why the grant funding is at $2,500 instead of a larger amount, so that they can spread that through the communities for that celebration.
But the main celebration is the 4th of July parade, right? Which is held in Coeur d'Alene.
Right.
So is there an opportunity to bring the funds together and work in conjunction with the city on this, as opposed to these multiple tiny, maybe have one larger celebration?
I think the city of Coeur d'Alene's Historic Preservation Commission would like to do that. It is, the courthouse is here in the city, and there is a long story between the county and the city putting that building together to create Coeur d'Alene as the county seat. So they are interested in celebrating the centennial as well. I don't know if they've voted on what they are going to apply for, but they will be applying.
Well, I kind of like the idea of the time capsule. We could take a look at what's in there and then put everything back along with current day stuff and set it up for the next
For the next 100 years.
100 years, or yes.
Yeah. And I can ask facilities and inquire about how we can access that, since it's under the cornerstone of the building itself. It's my understanding the Masons did that at all buildings in the counties that they were participating in building, so the local Masons may want to participate as well.
if you would send the board, or I don't mind taking it on, or Sarah, just a little paragraph what you're requesting specifically, then we can shoot it out to county employees and see, you know, especially those who've been here a while and have some of that history. So.
Okay, we'll do that. And just like kind of to wrap this all together, starting in January, we'll be beginning with a lecture series in the courthouse about the history of the county. We will have up to 10 lectures to attend, to talk about not only the building, but elected officials, judges, lawyers, sheriffs that have all worked in the building. We are working on the photo exhibit to put in the new Justice Building as well. And we are funding heritage markers throughout the county to mark all of our historic buildings. So there is a lot going on, and if there is a way to tie it all together on July 4th next year, I think that would be something that's a very positive reflection of our community and its history and development. So I will be sure to get that to you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
And nope, just come back in October and let us know what you've found out about the other cities and accessing the time capsule.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next up, Item 2, Hayden overhead costs. It's a discussion item. I have Brandy Falcon listed, but we also have Clerk Locke here.
Yes, Brandy Falcon for the record. I'm actually going to ask Captain Smart if he would start us off. He was gracious enough to come today, and I asked him to just do a super quick explanation to the board of the ideal service levels in the county based on this map that I know a couple different people have seen. But
Come on down, Captain Smart.
Sarah, can you make it bigger?
And then you want a microphone or something so people can hear you.
Thank you. Is it possible to make it bigger? Okay.
So,
Printed copies?
Yeah, we have printed copies. Yeah.
okay,
But you can run through it up there for people who are watching it at
a
home.
little Vanna White action up here. So Brandy had gotten a hold of us just to ask a little bit traditionally, maybe kind of what we used to do as far as assignments of these districts and what we currently are doing and what we'd like to do for the future. And obviously, these districts were broken up years ago. And since then, obviously, the landscape has changed considerably on that as well. So, you know, these created a District 1, which is our northern area of the county. We have a District 2 over here that was created, which is just west of the Post Falls up to the Hauser Lake area mostly. Then we have our 3 area, which is encompassing everything to the east of the 2 cities of Hayden and Coeur d'Alene. We have a 4 district, which is everything south of the river on the west side of the lake, all the way down to the tribal lands. We have a District 5 over here, which covers everything on the east side of the lake, all the way down to just below Harrison. We have a 6th section over here, which there's not a lot of structures or dwellings or anything, but there are a few out there, all the way up into the Dudley Mountain area. And then we have some Forest Service sections of District 7. And so when our staffing is as such, we like to be able to deploy deputies around the county into these zones. So we would assign someone for the day to be in District 1, another person in 2, another person in 3, another person in 4, and another person in the 5-6 area. Additionally, on top of that, then we would supply a variable unit on the west side and a variable unit on the east side, just to ensure that when calls for service come out, those deputies can be deployed to ensure that we have enough coverage for the types of calls for service that may need 2 deputies, 3 deputies, or such. Over the past several years, just with staffing levels being as they have been, we haven't been able to traditionally push deputies down into these lower districts as often, just due to the fact that we've been covering our primary 2, 3, and our variable cars and our District 1 deputy. And we've been covering the majority of this, and then calls for service down here have still been handled as needed. And so as we move forward with our staffing levels starting to increase, that is, again, our goal is to get back to more of that traditional or ideal law enforcement model of being able to push some more deputies down into these zones more regularly to, just do security checks, welfare checks, and any other calls for service that come out, as well as some of these roads have some good traffic needs on them where, Riverview is a heavy traffic area down here in 5 along the along the highway, but we get down to the Harrison area, running through town of Harrison and stuff, they often just request a little more traffic emphasis because it slows down and people don't. Questions?
I have a question. I have, or a comment. I've been talking, people have been asking me to have the sheriff's department have more people, more patrols down in the areas in 4 and 5. There's some very serious concerns, and it's real. So anyway, I think if you can get down there quicker, that'd be a good thing.
Right, yeah, as our staffing levels improve, we press people more down there.
I have a question for you. Given the priority between the districts that you just outlined, the Hayden contract, and SROs, how would you outline that priority for the sheriff's office? Are the districts first? Are the SROs first? Is the Hayden contract first? Because you have limited resources, right? And so, the question is if you don't have the manpower for something, who suffers in essence? So how would you prioritize those three items?
Well, they all work together. It's not just one part of that. We do have to satisfy those contracts. And so we do put people in those positions. And then we also try to ensure our main central locations where the most populated areas, the most crime occurs, are assigned units. And then beyond that, we just general patrols trying to hit these as time allows. So
Yeah.
there's nothing that says, we put a guy in 2, but there's nothing that says that we say you have to stay there. We do allow him, hey, can you drift down here on the other side?
Yeah.
Come across Riverview maybe, do a little bit of a loop, and those types of things.
Yeah, I guess what I'm referring to is, do we have to enter into these contracts so that we draw these resources? Like, for example, the SROs. If we're pulling people out of patrol to put them into a school, are we saying it's more important that we enter into that contract than it is to have these deputies down in 4 and 5, for example, like Commissioner Eberline said?
Well, you're trying to put me on the spot of telling the public who deserves more.
Well,
I'm not going to say that the schools don't deserve the safety and security that comes with an SRO,
Yeah.
but do the other residents deserve the potential safety of a deputy? Yes. And that's where we fight. We fight the battle of, if we can get to full staffing, because we were so short for years. And then the contracts came along and just kind of helped add to that. It wasn't that we weren't trying to still do it all together, but when we do assign the contract, then we're obligated to put somebody there. And so was that pulled from patrol? Yes. And it takes about a year to get that position replenished.
Yes.
And so as we continue to get our staffing levels back up, then it all should be able to equate and pan out.
Yeah.
With the exception of, we still have sick events, vacations, those, deployment, is based off a plethora of items. You can't just say it's automatically this way every day.
Well, I understand. And the point being is just, we have to decide as a county, where we want the resources to be allocated, and whether or not we should be looking at these contracts if it's at the expense of the resources. I completely agree with you in the sense that if we are fully staffed and someone wants to engage in a contract with the sheriff's office, it probably makes absolute sense, provided that we're recovering our cost, to provide that service. But if we're not going to recover the cost, which has been the case, and we're going to pull the resources out of patrol at the expense of these districts, I have to question, why are we even doing it? Now, I realize it's outside of your control, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot. But I think that this map is an excellent way to articulate a service level, because that's been one of the problems, especially with Hayden, is that they claim they pay their money for this service that, for example, the citizens of Coeur d'Alene pay for, but they don't get patrol services because they have a police department, right?
Sure.
And that's part of the justice fund. And I think that's where the auditing and department is going to go, is to try to articulate what is that bare minimum level of service that every county citizen deserves because they're paying into it, and then what is would be considered enhanced on top of that. From my perspective, I want us to recover all the money that we spend for contracts so that that money can go right back in, plow it in, reinvest it in the sheriff's office so we can keep the best deputies, not lose them to other jurisdictions, keep our pay very high and competitive. And that's why I'm asking the question, and I apologize if it came across as putting you on the spot. That was not the intention.
Again, we balance that fine line right now, every day. Before these contracts were such a primary focus, it wasn't as such, but they're here. And, Hayden does want extra service beyond. So should they pay in full for that? Yeah, probably. We need to incur those costs, because you're right. We're fighting that balance of our deputies do need to remain competitive. That's a huge thing in our world right now of we can't service any of these areas if we don't pay our guys and retain them and keep them.
That's right.
And so I can't
But-
argue with you on that point, and they're all important.
But Hayden's growth problems and how they have, how we know that crime is higher on a per capita basis in urban areas versus rural has put the county in a predicament of there's this additional crime. We have to allocate resources to it, right? But it's at the expense of these other parts of the county. And that's where I think, today's discussion is to help identify, where those deficiencies are and what Hayden can do to manage its issues. I mean, because again, if we had control over the growth trajectory, like we do in the unincorporated part of the county, then we could manage this much better. This board would be faced with the cost of law enforcement by saying yes. And in fact, I applaud you because in these community development reports, you are largely the lone voice that says we have concerns about delivering a level of service to the constituents by saying yes to more growth. I trust, does Hayden ask the sheriff's office what their thoughts are on approving a multi-family development?
Yes, they request us to put, and we submit a written letter back to them, again, denoting many of it, whether it's a traffic-related concern due to ingress,
Yeah.
egress, how it's going to impact major arterials, as well as, yes, okay, now you're adding more homes. If we're talking about a deputy per capita, then it's going to need to be increased at some point to help cover that, because just more homes mean more people, and unfortunately more crime develops from that.
And-
Then that impacts our jail as well. We
And-
just more people who's going to be involved there.
And do they address that monetarily? I mean, I know they address it by asking for more deputies, but have they addressed it monetarily? Meaning that with every new growth decision that they say yes to, they're allocating more money to the sheriff's office for that deputy or police officer per 1,000 residents.
Our current contract does not speak to anything of growth models. If they
Yeah.
increase, more comes to us. No, it's
Okay.
just right now based on, a single deputy level of service that we're giving.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, go
Few
ahead.
questions. So typically, though, when we entertain an SRO contract, that is so we can backfill it. So the SRO is, theoretically paying for 75%, 70%, and then the county gets the benefit for the other one. So typically that, while it does put you behind a year to get a deputy trained, we still benefit from having that, because do you still not have to respond to schools every week for incidents, which the SROs then can handle?
Yes, yeah, all of these positions, if and when backfilled properly and our staffing is up, can marry into a great picture. It's just a matter of getting there, and for years we've been behind. And so we're hopeful in the next 2 or 3, we can pull out and be considered full staff with everybody off of training, all positions filled, to where, yes, we're able to plug these holes as well as still have those. And yes, the schools do require a certain amount of deputy response, that having that school resource officer, he's there readily available to take action that day. And many items that are, this year we're implementing more tracking with that as well. There's tons of times when students, parents are just popping into the SROs, not creating technically what we would call calls for service, just side conversations, counseling sessions to ensure that criminal activity doesn't spark up, that we wouldn't get if we didn't have a SRO in the school. We would be behind the game on that. We'd have to be responding to those as calls for service.
Can a counselor take the place of an SRO?
I don't know that I can fully say that. I think that's a semantics. For some people will argue that a counselor can be one who can talk to students and curb habits. But as far as anything that pops up criminal from that, no, they can't address any of those actions. So inevitably, they stumble across something that's criminal. We then have to trip into it and handle it ourselves anyway. So I think that we're filling 2 roles with one by having an SRO there ready to be able to do that dual.
And is the tribe still providing patrol services for the reservation?
Yeah, a lot of that, yes, yeah. We have There's a mutual aid agreement in place with that. There's new state statute that states that they can handle some of the state crimes that come their way. And so anything particularly down by the casino, because it technically is their casino, there's many drug calls and stuff that they handle for us just because it's such a long time to get down there. It's easier for them to respond over, handle it, and take the action and move on, as opposed by the time we drive all the way down for it.
Yeah, I think when the time comes, we'll probably talk about the stats for the number of calls for service for the SROs, because I think the numbers on a per week basis may come in a little lower than you might expect, Commissioner Duncan, for this. But that's for another discussion. This is about the Hayden contract. I don't have any other questions unless either of you do. No. Thank you so much, Captain Smart.
So before I jump into my PowerPoint presentation, I wanted to kind of reiterate some of what was discussed last week in having discussions with the sheriff's office. We talked about how, just in terms of a staffing level, that our contracts are the priority. And so if we have signed contracts with a school district or with a city, filling those positions comes first before filling our normal patrol positions. So I think I've just completed 4 budget cycles with Kootenai County, and in those 4 cycles, any patrol deputies that were added were for contracts. And so that means when the board approved adding new FTEs for contracts, that an existing deputy was pulled from patrol to fill the contract, and then patrol had to absorb bare minimum, as Commissioner Duncan said, a year vacancy to get that filled and trained, assuming they were able to hire someone right away. So just in terms of vacancies and how they work throughout the different contracts and divisions that we have, the staffing for contracts does take priority. And so, Sarah, could you put my PowerPoint up? Thank you. Oh, now I have to change my, sorry, give me 1 second. It's not. Sarah, do you remember how to fix my displays? A former BOCC employee always did it for me. Sorry, can we pause for technical?
Yeah, we'll just hang tight for a couple minutes until we can get our technical challenges overcome here.
Do we want to see if 911 can give us a staffing update, or do we have to go into executive session? I don't see a lawyer here, so I'm not sure.
We can go into the advisory board process real quick. Do you want to do that while we're waiting?
Yeah, that's a 30-second conversation. So, did you want to handle?
Well,
the
we can
advisory
go into
boards.
3 and 4.
Yep, that's fine.
So, well, while we're dealing with our technical challenges. Oh, you got it? All right.
Sorry, sometimes it makes you change your display settings, and I could not remember how to do it. Okay, did you want to do a different agenda item, or do you want me to proceed with my presentation?
No, you can go ahead and proceed.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a timeline, kind of my involvement with this contract, and then at the end we'll circle back to some specific documents, and we'll dive into the details of the documents themselves. So sometime in early April, the undersheriff gave me a hard copy of a document that he had been provided by the city of Hayden. And he gave it to me and said, hey, we were given this by the city of Hayden. Can you take a look at it for me and let me know what you think? So April 17th is when I created my version of the document and started to do my own analysis. And I'm going to have some screenshots of documents in the presentation. You have them printed in front of you, and I'll also upload this presentation and the actual documents that I have screenshotted here onto the auditor's page so people can look at the full document if they want to. So April 17th is when I began my work looking at the data that was provided by the city of Hayden to the sheriff's office. And then April 29th, myself, the deputy finance director, went out to the sheriff's office, and we met with the undersheriff, Captain Smart, Captain Heil, Lieutenant Sifford, and then the sheriff's chief budget officer to discuss my analysis of the data from the city of Hayden. And at that meeting with the sheriff's office, we reviewed a memo that I had drafted and made changes. So the memo that I ended up writing regarding the Justice Fund was reviewed in full with the sheriff's office. It was discussed. We were all put that essentially together. And then April 30th, the memo that I wrote regarding the Justice Fund and regarding the data that I had looked at from the city of Hayden, I wrote that memo to the undersheriff. And I sent him the supporting data with the memo, and I emailed that to him. And then that same day, he sent that memo and the supporting data to the Hayden mayor and the Hayden city administrator, and then CC'd myself and Commissioner Duncan. And then that memo did include a detailed description of what the Justice Fund is and what it pays for versus the enhanced dedicated law enforcement service that the city of Hayden is requesting. So these are screenshots of the memo. I'm just gonna go ahead and read the actual memo right now so that everyone knows what it included. And in this memo, when I talk about cost figures, these were as of in April when I wrote it. Now the cost numbers are actually higher due to having just passed the FY26 budget, which included wage increases. So I'm just gonna go through this. So it's addressed to the undersheriff. And I said, below is a summary of our discussion regarding the Justice Fund, as well as our discussion regarding the analysis you were provided by Hayden for their law enforcement contract with the county. Every property owner in Kootenai County pays a portion of their property tax to Kootenai County. Part of that property tax goes to Kootenai County's Justice Fund. The Justice Fund is used to pay for all the justice services that the county provides for citizens. This includes the county's portion of constitutional public defense, juvenile detention, juvenile probation, adult misdemeanor probation, sheriff administration, sheriff civil, animal control, patrol, detectives, driver's licensing, sheriff records, SWAT, search and rescue, sheriff's maintenance, jail, rec safety, and then as well as the prosecutor. Kootenai County Sheriff deputies have jurisdiction anywhere in Kootenai County. City police departments are responsible for calls in their own city limits. However, sheriff deputies may respond as well if needed. The taxes that city property owners pay into Kootenai County's Justice Fund cover this level of service by the Kootenai County Sheriff deputies within city limits, which is an as-needed response, as well as all the other justice services included in the Justice Fund. See the list above. Cities also provide their residents with other law enforcement services, such as animal control, detectives, and community service officers. The cost of city law enforcement services also includes the overhead costs of operations, such as ammo, weapons, uniforms, training, insurance, command staff, overtime, etc. The city of Hayden does not provide law enforcement services to its residents. Instead, it has requested that the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office provide them with a higher and enhanced level of service than the level of service that is provided to city residents of all the other cities in Kootenai County. The higher and enhanced level of service provided by Kootenai County comes at an additional cost to taxpayers, primarily in the form of enhanced administrative burden for Kootenai County and increased personnel costs for the personnel assigned to Hayden. If the city of Hayden does not pay the cost for the county to provide this higher and enhanced level of service, then this cost becomes the burden of other taxpayers, such as city residents of Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls and residents in the unincorporated county. Although Hayden property tax owners pay taxes into the county's Justice Fund, that does not mean Kootenai County is required to provide the requested enhanced level of law enforcement services for free or at a discount. Any discount given to Hayden must be paid by taxpayers in the rest of the county. Kootenai County has 8 dedicated patrol positions for Hayden and 1 average cost detective equivalent, and Hayden is considering requesting a dedicated lieutenant position for FY26. Additionally, Kootenai County will contract directly with Hayden Meadows, Atlas, and Dalton Elementary in FY26 for 1 school resource officer. The current wages and benefits for these 8 patrol positions and 1 average cost detective equivalent is $1.1 million, and if the cost of a new lieutenant is added, the wage and benefits increases to $1.2. This does not include any pay increases for the next fiscal year 2026, such as a COLA. This also doesn't include the cost of any other law enforcement services, such as animal control, community service officers, or the overhead costs of command staff, overtime, and operations. So then I had a screenshot of the costs, which, as I said, now the costs are higher. Using the data and methodology provided by Hayden, you can see the price per citizen for law enforcement services and the Justice Fund in Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, Rathdrum, and Hayden. The calculation uses the city's law enforcement budget plus the amount of property tax each city's property owners pay into the county's Justice Fund to calculate a price per citizen. Coeur d'Alene has a price per citizen of $611.49. Post Falls is $418.95. Rathdrum is $367.73, and Hayden is $226.40. Once again, using the data provided by Hayden, you can calculate the levy rate each city's property owners are paying for law enforcement services and the Justice Fund. Using the levy rate, you can calculate per $100,000 in taxable value how much is used to pay for law enforcement services and the Justice Fund in each city. Coeur d'Alene is $303.02, Post Falls is $267.57, Rathdrum is $251.62, and Hayden is $113.23. Based on the data provided by Hayden, please see the conclusions below. Hayden is paying less per citizen and per $100,000 in taxable value for law enforcement services than the other cities in Kootenai County with their own police departments. Hayden is paying less than half of what Rathdrum pays per $100,000 in taxable value for law enforcement services, even though Hayden has more citizens and almost double the taxable value of Rathdrum. Hayden is only being asked to pay for the costs of salaries and benefits for the employees used for Hayden's law enforcement needs. Again, this memo was written before I was approached on calculating overhead costs. They are not being asked to pay Kootenai County for all the overhead and operational costs associated with these employees, such as uniforms, ammo, weapons, training, certifications, command staff records, administration, etc. These are all costs Hayden would need to pay if they provided their own law enforcement services to their citizens. For Hayden to pay 70% of Rathdrum's price for $100,000 of taxable value for law enforcement services and the Justice Fund, they would need to pay Kootenai County $3.2 million. For Hayden to have the same price as Rathdrum's price per $100,000 of taxable value, they would have to pay Kootenai County $5.6 million. The county tries to make every effort to maximize all revenue sources in the budget to offset any property tax increases passed on to the citizens. As a reminder, the data I've used for the wages discussed is based on direction I've received from your office. And after I wrote this memo, it did spark the conversation of charging at least some of the overhead costs. And my intent was never to establish a budget for the law enforcement contract saying that they needed to be equal to Rathdrum at $5 million or saying that Hayden needed to be at 70% of Rathdrum at $3.2 million. Those were simply examples given to put into context of the other cities in our county, saying this is what residents are paying in these other cities. In comparison, showing what a great deal the city of Hayden is getting by utilizing our county sheriff's office. So that's the memo that I wrote to the undersheriff. This is a screenshot of the data that I attached to the memo, much of which I reference in the memo that I just read. And as I said, the cost figures are now outdated due to the approval of wage increases in FY26. And then, like I said, the other agencies are provided as an example to show the true cost of having a city police department versus the savings that are incurred by using the sheriff's office. And it was not meant to establish a budget for the Hayden dedicated law enforcement service. This is the same tax data, but later I did reformat it to make it a little bit more readable, so people might prefer this version better. And once again, I just want to show that every citizen in the county, if they live in a city, they're paying for 2 layers of law enforcement. They're paying for their local police department if they have one, and they're paying into the county's Justice Fund. And so I'll go into that tax document. So this just shows, for example, Hayden is 7% of the county's total taxable value. And if you look at just law enforcement services, City of Coeur d'Alene, just for the City of Coeur d'Alene Police Department, there's per citizen, it's a cost of $453. City of Hayden, it's $69. City of Rathdrum is $253. And once again, remember, Rathdrum is smaller than Hayden, and they're paying $253 for their police department per citizen. City of Hayden is paying $69.
Right.
And all of this is based on the current year contract and last taxable, the current tax
Right.
year.
And Brandy, and Rathdrum has 16 full-time
Police,
employees.
perfect.
Yeah.
So that's just a comparison of the dollar amount per citizen for police department services. So you can see unincorporated county is 0 because they just have sheriff's office. So going back to my presentation here. And then just as an example of justice fund level of service versus enhanced service. So in my discussions with the sheriff's office, by signing a law enforcement contract with the city of Hayden, that gives the sheriff's office the legal authority to enforce all of the city ordinances in the city of Hayden. And that is not something that is usually part of the justice fund level of service that we provide to all the other cities. So some of the examples of different ordinances that have been enforced in the past or can be enforced would be like the grass height of people's lawns, garbage cans being on the street for too long, illegal parking, the number of RVs that people have parked on one lot, helping their city code enforcement people do code enforcement or enforce building permits, taking care of nuisance homes, addressing curfew, and then also parking for snow removal. And then the city of Hayden also has a deputy that's present at all their meetings as well, which is something that other cities are not getting from the sheriff's office. So those are just some examples of services Hayden is receiving that other cities are not.
And then,
So-
I'm sorry, Captain Smart, are we able to see, and not today, in general, I think you guys are going to do a presentation to us, but what the calls for service are, I think you have to use the other one. I don't know if that one's working. Going out and doing these things at the request of the city, what is that calls for service level versus just regular if you were not providing enhanced service? So I don't know that you know that off the top of your head, but I'm just saying, can we get that information?
Clarify again what you're looking for.
Okay, so she's listed a whole bunch of things that enhanced service gets, but I'd like to know how many calls for service is based on this list versus based on what sheriff's office would have to respond to without the enhanced level of service.
Well, I can tell you right now, without the enhanced, we wouldn't respond necessarily to any of this.
Correct, but
Dedicated deputy, and the other deputies who are not Hayden deputies, they don't go do any of this either. This is only at the request of, because we have a dedicated guy there, Hayden has asked that we take on some of these. And some of these things are, we've actually reached out to them, and like the code enforcement stuff, there's a whole process for that anyway, that we make them jump through all the hoops before we even would entertain getting on board with that, because it's a civil nature for most of it.
right, so is it like 50% calls for service versus 50% of this list, or is it, 80-20? I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking for, and again, if you don't, I don't think you would have it off the top of your head.
I better not say unless I try to pull up something.
Okay, that's totally fine, it's just, that's something that would be helpful.
I think it's gonna be very small, but we'll
Sure.
certainly try to find something.
Okay, thank you.
Also a reminder, with our contract though, the city of Hayden is collecting traffic fines and fees. One of the reports we pull from our financial system, fiscal year '24 I have $46,351. So that is on top of the contract, right, that they get a portion of these traffic fines and fees.
Yeah, that's for any unincorporated city gets returns on those, no matter where we do the patrols. But yes, just, Hayden does request, traffic enforcement be done at, at a higher level than maybe other areas, just because that's one of their biggest concerns is traffic.
And then June 24th is when the Hayden mayor and city administrator presented their contract request to the BOCC at the status update meeting. And then that same day, and I think it was said that there was some mix-up and they didn't remember receiving the undersheriff's email with that memo that I had crafted. And so that same day, I forwarded to the mayor and the city administrator again that memo regarding the Justice Fund and the supporting data. And then June 25th, at the budget deliberation meeting, I presented information related to the Hayden law enforcement contract to the board. I did a discussion over just the hard costs, which are personnel, and then I did touch on overhead costs, which are soft costs. And then the data that I did present to the board that day was emailed to the Hayden mayor and the city administrator at the mayor's request. So this is a screenshot of the data I presented at the June 25th budget meeting in regards just to the personnel costs. And at the time, it was a $245,000 contract deficit, which would have been a 0.4% tax increase. And then I updated it after our new FY26 wages, and it just brings it to a $280,000 deficit.
And that's without overhead,
That's without overhead.
operating overhead. That's just the
Any
loaded
overhead
salary
at all.
cost.
That's
That's it.
just salaries.
Yeah, okay.
That's what we put in people's paychecks.
Yep.
So then I did a discussion over overhead costs, and this is a screenshot of this document, which we'll dive into here in a minute. And this does include overhead costs. And the purpose of this document was to help give myself and the board an idea of a reasonable range of percentage that the board could agree on as an overhead markup for contract negotiations. And then on August 8th, I sent it to the city administrator in Hayden. I had updated it with, at that time, what Hayden had budgeted as their revenue of $1,390,000, and then I had made some reductions to the overhead cost at the request of the sheriff, but it did not affect the 40% rate that the board had proposed. And then currently, I've reduced the revenue back down to $1,049,000, and then I've increased the wages up to the new FY26 rate. And so if I do that, then the $1,049,000 doesn't even cover 100% of wages, even after we give them credits for the vehicles, which is, that's reducing the amount that they would owe us. Even after I do that, we're still like $8,900 short of covering just the wages and benefits. Then on June 27th, myself, the clerk, Commissioner Matari, and the executive assistant met with the Hayden mayor and the city administrator. The same data that I presented at the June 25th budget meeting was discussed with them and distributed. We had a lengthy in-person meeting over that. And then July 10th is when there was a workshop with the city of Hayden, council, the sheriff, Commissioner Matari, and then the executive assistant, the clerk, and myself were also present. July 22nd is when Chair Matari emailed the Hayden mayor and the city administrator the 3 contract options the board had agreed to propose to the city. So that's just a screenshot here of what was sent to them, 3 different options. And then August 29th, just last week, I was requested to send the 3 options again to the undersheriff for the purposes of negotiating service levels, and so I sent it out again. I did reduce the revenue to the new budget number that Hayden has, and then I also updated the wages now that we have the COLA approved. July 29th, the city of Hayden had a budget meeting. It wasn't online, and I didn't receive any communication, and so I don't believe the board did either, and so because of that, the next day, July 30th, at the budget meeting, the county budget meeting with the BOCC and myself, we discussed the City of Hayden meeting from the previous day based on the documentation that was on the City of Hayden's website with their agenda, showed $1,390,000 was in their budget that they were publishing for law enforcement services. So we did the same, and we grossed up our revenue a little bit to cover the extra costs of the lieutenant in hopes that the funding would come through to pay for that. And this is a screenshot of the document from the City of Hayden's website, and I've just highlighted in yellow where we got the $1,390,000. So they had $1,295,000 labeled Kootenai County Sheriff salary, and then $95,000 labeled Kootenai County Sheriff vehicle. So that's where we got the $1,390,000. August 19th, the City of Hayden had a budget planning meeting, and it was on YouTube, and I watched it, and they did vote to reduce their revenue for the law enforcement contract from $1,390,000 to $1,144,000, which was $1,049,000 for sheriff's salary and $95,000 for a vehicle. So that was a total $246,000 decrease. They adopted their budget ordinance on August 26th, and then on August 27th, which was the day of the county's budget public hearing, the board received an email from the Hayden mayor with a letter detailing that Hayden's FY26 budget for law enforcement services was now $1,049,000. So that was the day of the public hearing. And so I made revisions to my presentation, and obviously, that was just last week. So as we remember, we made the appropriate adjustments to the county's adopted budget. So that's the timeline. now I'm gonna kind of dive into overhead costs. So when you look at expenses, we have the concept of direct costs, which is personnel. That's literally what we pay people salaries, and the cost of their benefits, such as their retirement and their health insurance. And then we have indirect costs, which is things like their overtime, the depreciation on their vehicles, the fuel that we put into their vehicles, the maintenance on their vehicles, repairs to their vehicles, ICRIMP, which is our liability insurance. So we have our umbrella liability and we have the auto liability, and then we have weapons. We have to buy weapons for every deputy. We have to train every deputy. We have to buy uniforms for every deputy. There's lots of miscellaneous type supplies that they have to carry in their vehicles or on their person. They handle public records requests, and so we're handling public records requests if there are any related to cases in the city of Hayden. We're doing records in terms of maintaining case files. We have admin support, the people who do the payroll for these Hayden deputies, which is more complex, and that handle the budgeting for the Hayden deputies and the payables and the billing of the contract. And then we have command staff. We have captains and lieutenants and sergeants that we pay for. So those are all overhead costs. And so now I'm going to go into my overhead spreadsheet.
Just real quick,
Yep.
are we tracking expenses from our previous Hayden contracts?
Not currently. I am working with the sheriff's office to get them to make that change, which they are short-staffed. They don't have an accounts payable person right now, and so it's taking a little bit of time. If we were to ever get to the point where the sheriff's office is my goal, I'm working on it, to be tracking some of those expenses separately for Hayden, we might be able to do a hybrid of overhead and dollar for dollar. But there are certain things that, like the sheriff pays one, several $100,000 bill for Spillman, and that comes out of one budget. It doesn't get split between all the other budgets. Same with some ICRIMP stuff. So there are certain overhead costs that we can't break out just for Hayden, but I am trying to get them to break out the things they can, which is fuel and maintenance and ammo and training and uniforms, overtime, those types of things.
All right, thank you.
So this is a spreadsheet that I came up with in an effort to calculate and do my best to allocate these overhead costs. And so first I have the bodies over here, the deputies and the detective and the requested lieutenant. And I've increased their wages to reflect the FY26 COLA. So that gives us personnel costs. Then for vehicle depreciation, I've taken the cost of the vehicles that we're buying in next year's budget and I've divided them by 5 years because we depreciate our vehicles over 5 years. And I did not charge them for the deputies that are currently driving vehicles that Hayden purchased. So for the other deputies that are driving county cars, that's being added as an overhead cost, okay? And then I've taken overtime. So we have never budgeted the Hayden overtime separately until FY26 we are going forward. So, but we do have the expenses tracked separately. So I went back to FY24 and divided the overtime by the number of deputies that were coding their overtime there. So on average, it's $7,100 a deputy. And then I got my ICRIMP numbers straight from John Getty, so I know those are correct. He gave me the calculation for the comp and collision for auto, and then the liability is a calculation based on the payroll for every FTE. And then I've taken and I've allocated the cost of the admin department per deputy. So the way I did that was coming over here to admin. I took the personnel budget of the admin department and I divided it by the entire sheriff's office. So that means that basically per employee or per deputy, it's $5,400. And those are the people that are doing backgrounds, payroll, accounts payable, budget. They're doing all the admin work for the entire office. And I took the operating budget of admin and I divided it by the entire sheriff's office because that's paying for things like Spillman and costs of things like background. There's just a lot of things in there that tend to cover the entire office. So I divided it by the entire sheriff's office to come up with $1,800 per employee.
Brandy, can I just ask a question here? Spillman, we get reimbursed from other agencies in the area.
But not from Hayden. Yes.
Right.
So what I did right here, debt is $199. That's Spillman, and that does not include the amount that E911 pays. So I divided it per employee, so it's like $607 per employee. So if Hayden was paying us I'm adding it as overhead, 607 per employee.
Because the other agencies reimburse us.
Yes.
They reimbursing whatever that allocated amount
Actually, I'm
is.
in the middle of getting some questions answered on why the amount they're reimbursing us is so low compared to what we're paying. But they pay us something. So some agencies pay us something, I'll just say that. So, yeah.
But we don't know if they're paying their fair share
I have no
just
idea
yet.
the logic behind what they pay us. That's my next little project.
Yeah, I think you'll discover when a lot of situations, because we have the same with, for example, transit, what is the basis for it, and I think there's a little bit more of a formula there.
I'm sure
but-
there's yeah, I just don't know how those billings are calculated, so.
Yeah.
But there are some agencies that pay us. Then I took patrol, and I said, okay, the loaded cost of a captain divided by all the people that he supervises, $1,800 a person. The rest of the command staff over the people they supervise, $24,000 a person. So I went through and I did the same for community service, animal control, and then patrol's B budget, animal control's B budget, and then debt, and this is the tasers. So patrol's budget for tasers covers about 81 people, so that's $875 per person. So detectives have a different B budget than patrol. So I did the same dollar amount of, it's $1,800 per person, so the detective gets $1,800 for having a captain. They have command staff, and then they have their B budgets. They have a different B budget than patrol. And then we included some records here, $4,800 per person. So that's the general logic of how I came up with these, which it's different per person because of the ICRIMP, and detectives are more expensive. So that's what I came up with per body, which is $793,000 total. Now, if we were to assume all of my numbers are 100% correct and we're going to charge every single dollar, then you would be charging Hayden 61%. So that's saying you would take their personnel costs and increase them by an additional 61%. We are not doing that because I'm leaving room for saying there could be some negotiations here. Maybe, some of my FTE numbers might be slightly too high or too low. And so we reduced it all the way down to 40%, so that we basically marked it off. We reduced it by $275,000 to leave room for any small fluctuations in FTE counts, things like that. And then we additionally gave the city of Hayden $271,000 in credits for the vehicles they've already purchased. So for the FY24 vehicles, we're giving them credit for the book value as of 10/1, which is the beginning of FY26. So based on when they bought them, they have been depreciating for an amount of time, and the city of Hayden has gotten use out of them for that time. So we're crediting them back for the start of FY26 until the end of those vehicles' useful lives. The FY25 vehicles have not even been put into service yet, so we're giving them credit for the entire purchase price.
But the county's been paying for the vehicles that have not been put into service yet, or paying for other vehicles in lieu of the ones that have not been put in service yet.
And that's where we come in and where I charged, $18,000 a body for overhead of depreciation for the cars.
So we're giving them $81,000 credit for 4 cars.
However many they bought in FY24, I think it was only 2.
2?
Well, the third one's being used by the Hayden SRO. So that is now a separate contract with the schools. So 2 here. Because the school is still getting the benefit from that car. So, and then I believe the 2 in FY25. So when you give them the credits and you reduce the overhead to 40%, you come to a contract of 1.433. So we go back to the contract options the board proposed to the city of Hayden. So in options 1 and 2, I have the 40% overhead calculated there, as well as the reductions for the vehicles. So those were taken into account in those options. So once again, that overhead spreadsheet, I do all this work just to come up with 61%, so then we can kind of anecdotally say, well, we're not going to go that high. We're going to leave some room for error. Let's go all the way down to 40%.
And that 61% does not include the undersheriff and the sheriff's salary.
Correct, it does not. And it does not include civil.
So when we're talking 40%, that's just based on like I just watched you go through all the different numbers. How does that equal out to other contracts like the SRO and stuff like that? Because like NIC wouldn't use records.
Correct. And I haven't calculated any additional overhead stuff for the NIC contract. I know that Dalton Gardens, they do pay more than the cost of the assigned deputy, not quite 40%, but they do pay more. And so I think next year, I'm planning to meet with the board late winter, early spring to get their direction on if they want to use the same overhead rate for dedicated law enforcement services, which I believe is Hayden and Dalton. I'll have to check if there's other really small contracts.
Hayden Lake.
And then, and I know we do some stuff with Fernan as well. So, and then how the board wants to handle the SRO contracts. I think they're a little bit different. But I know at a recent meeting, the board gave direction to the undersheriff, I think, to start seeking 100% reimbursement on wages, at least, wages and benefits. But we haven't talked yet on if the board wants to consider overhead for SRO contracts.
Yeah. It's a conversation for a different time, I think, so.
Yeah, so that's the detail of the spreadsheet of how I calculated overhead costs. And I just want to emphasize, an overhead rate, which is a percentage, it's a method to allocate those indirect costs, such as ammo and training and uniforms, to direct costs, so allocating them on a per deputy basis. And so just the math, you divide your total overhead costs by your personnel costs, you get a percentage, and then you multiply that percentage by the personnel costs to give you your final contract price. So that overhead rate is something that can be negotiated, and obviously we did lower it from, I started at 70%, then it was at 60%, and we lowered it to 40%. And so a rate is a percentage of your personnel costs. It's very different. It is not a dollar for dollar reimbursement.
Yeah.
So I hope that makes sense.
And also, part of the rationale for the 40% was to get us out of the car dealership business because of the lag between when they want a car, when it actually goes into service. There's no real description of what happens if and the city council's been talking about this, what happens if we don't renew the contract? Are we supposed to turn those cars in? Are we supposed to offer a warranty with them? There's no discussion about that, and you have to have that kind of language. Now, the other thing I would argue for the board to consider is the fact that the more precise we can track the expenses, the more precise we can allocate expenses. But we're not doing that right now. And so the next best way is to uniformly amortize that expense across all deputies and then assign that amount to those deputies who are working in Hayden. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
And then lastly, just in conclusion, the goal is for contract revenues to cover the expenses of providing enhanced law enforcement services. If we enter into a contract that does have a deficit, that just means that deficit is being funded by taxpayers that don't live in the city of Hayden, right? And so for an example, I'm a property taxpayer in Post Falls. So if there's a contract with a deficit, part of my property taxes are paying Kootenai County to cover what the city of Hayden has been unable to pay, if that makes sense. And so I know that a lot of that type of stuff can be really, subjective depending on who you are and how you look at it, probably where you live in the county. But that's kind of the financial reality of it, is how that works. And so looking forward, I would just say that it's really important that cost recovery should be the highest priority for all elected officials when negotiating any contract, including law enforcement contracts.
So you also subsidize community development and some other things as a city resident.
Great progress,
Yes.
increasing their fees. Because, yeah.
Yeah, but the goal is not to have the county subsidize these services. And, I think,
The city's subsidizing them,
well,
subsidizing some county services that only county residents use.
what are you referring to exactly?
Well, like community development's just one of them, that the city residents do not benefit from that service that they still pay for.
But-
I think about 2 years ago, we started looking at that, maybe even.
We've
Yeah.
increased their fees, so we don't really levy much for community development. Is there some work that our community development does in partnership with the city building departments, such as like comp plan and making sure that like planning amongst different agencies agrees and flows with each
Yeah.
other?
Well, and that's the whole point of why we increased the fees, so that the city residents
Correct.
weren't.
I
you know?
understand that. I'm just pointing out that there are other things that,
Well,
that we do.
You're right, and that's why, I think as a board, it's time for us to end that practice, which I think we have been. And the part that stands out the most to me is the fact that Hayden, kind of went up and down like a yo-yo. It was 1.1 something million that they initially came to us with.
1,144,000.
Yeah, which was $116 or something more than the previous year, some very low dollar amount, even though they wanted a lieutenant, right? And then they came up to 1.39 million, and then their city council settled on 1,049,000. Now, here's what kind of stands out a little bit to me, and this is an article in the CDA Press from when was that? 2022, August 10th, 2022. And Hayden Mayor Scott Forsaw said, considering what other cities in the region and state pay for law enforcement, including municipalities similar in size to Hayden, paying $2 million for police services, $600,000 is a bargain. They've known this. There's no secrets here. The games of pretending need to end. I think all we're asking for is that the city reimburse the county for the services that they use and not charge them 1 penny more or 1 penny less. But the message that the city has sent us is we don't want to continue to work towards parity. We want to lower that dollar amount, and you guys are on your own. And so I would argue that this board should just focus on developing a rate through the auditor's office. That rate goes to the sheriff's office. The sheriff negotiates the level of service. If they want all dog catchers, I guess that's what they'll get. If they want to listen to the sheriff's office on what is most effective of how to deploy that money with deputies, whether it's more junior deputies or more senior deputies based upon the pay, then they should have that discussion. But I think it's just time that they have an honest discussion with their citizens about this, because the days of the great pretending need to end. They've known this for years. They've known it. And any other city of a similar size is paying significantly more. And to act like that they're due something because they pay into something that the rest of the county citizens pay into, I think it's being dishonest to their own constituents.
I think there's some nuances too that Hayden's never had it, even though they're dedicated, they've gone in outside the city and handled calls and other things. And so I think the baseline discussion comes back to what is the level of service for the county areas, what is the level of service required for Hayden based on the sheriff's recommendations. So, I mean, it's a deeper conversation. I totally agree that they've been getting a good deal. I just get concerned that April 30th letter didn't say that we were going to now bring in overhead costs than we did for this budget cycle. So to me, it's like SROs. It's just a little bit not enough notice. So, we're at where we're at, and
They've known for years, one. And two, look, Commissioner Duncan, I applaud the fact that we should be establishing a level of service for the county. That should be something that every county citizen sees, because they're paying into it. We're taking their money, and in exchange, they're due a service for it. Okay, that's the first thing. So I agree with you on that. The second thing, though, is that this is a problem that almost every county in this country has dealt with, certainly the state of Idaho. And there is a model to follow. And I've pulled up contracts from other cities in the state of Idaho, and they pay significantly more. And everyone knows it.
and I'm not arguing that they shouldn't pay
the
more. I'm
nuance-
arguing about the timing is
But there is no when. That's the problem. They've
There-
known for years and they haven't come up. They keep asking for another year. I mean, this is like dealing with a child. Just one more chance, Mom, Dad, one more chance. That's all this is. It's done. And from my perspective, I mean, if the board wants to give Hayden more time, it's their prerogative. But they've known this. It's been in the newspaper. Everybody knows it. It's the great pretending. That's the way I see it. And that's why when we had this presentation brought before the board, it was stated by some they thought this was a good deal. Again, losing several $100,000. When do we fix it? I say now's the time. And they need to go back to their taxpayers and they need to explain to them exactly what the deal is and what the real cost is and how far they are off from every other city of a similar size. I mean, they're not even remotely close to discuss nuance, is the way I see it. Does anyone have any other questions, thoughts? Commissioner Eberlein, you've been pretty silent. And I agree with you on the pay-to-play type stuff. You
Yes,
know,
that's-
they play with their growth model, but they don't want to pay for it. And they dump that cost onto the county.
Yeah, otherwise taxpayers outside the city of Hayden are gonna pick up the tab.
They also get benefit for having more officers on the street.
Well, I would love to see the quantifying of that benefit.
And that's,
Okay, because that's been the
what we're waiting
problem, is
for.
we can't quantify what that benefit is. What do we get? Because, and Captain Smart, you know this, there's a difference between reactive law enforcement and proactive law enforcement. And proactive, I would presume, is when you actually have time for deputies to go out and patrol and look for issues versus getting a call to show up after the fact, right? Is that kind of the difference?
yeah,
Yeah.
and those are all
Okay.
great numbers. That
So-
would be extremely helpful.
So how much time is spent proactively patrolling in sections 4 and 5, like Commissioner Eberlein asked, because he hears from constituents, there's no patrolling. And so then, so what really happens is they just get drawn up to the city. And we know that the city has not approached any of their big box retailers, which is a huge draw on law enforcement services. I believe that it's a fair amount of time at one of the big box retailers, and they've never approached them to say, hey, we want you to cough up some money or do something because you're drawing away resources from the rest of the county. Never happened. It's not happened so far. Why not? I mean, those are the kind of nuances that I ask. Why not? Why have they not gone after the areas where they're actually drawing these resources in an outsized fashion and trying to address that? So I want to see those reports of how much time is spent proactively patrolling versus reactive law enforcement. I'd love to see that. And since you're the liaison, I hope that you're able to help get those reports generated so that, you know, the community can see this stuff, the county. Sorry, Commissioner Eberlein, you were about to say something and then I just once again hijacked it, so forgive me. If there's nothing else, we can move on to the next item.
Thank you, Brandy.
To do it. All right. Thank you very much. I'd like to just say I really appreciate your detail and your supporting documentation. And Captain Smart, thank you again for coming down. Appreciate it. Next up, item 3, advisory board process. It's a discussion item, and we have Commissioner Duncan.
Yes, for this year, I would prefer that when all the applications come in, that we have a public discussion on who each one of us wants to interview and from that, because in the past, it's just been behind the scenes. Well, 2 of 3 said they want this person, so that's what happens. But I'd rather have a public discussion and about the different applicants.
Commissioner Eberlein,
Sounds fair.
there you go.
Okay?
Anything else on item 3?
Nope.
All right, we'll move on to item 4, addendum to the Hayden Area Regional Sewer Board budget.
Yeah, so I asked for this board to approve addendum language to the HARB's budget that said that no entity would unfairly withhold their approval. And so the district came back and incorporated that language into their requested addendum. So I wanted to bring it back before the board, and I don't know if you had a chance to read this document that was in your packet. But essentially, they're saying that Hayden Lake Sewer District agrees that it shall approve lines 254 and 281 if the bids for those items come in at or below each budgeted line item. And then it lists that for the three different line items that they had problems on. So I just wanted to make sure that this board is in agreement with that language.
Well, it seems fair.
Okay.
I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I think so too.
So, all right, because the budget hearing will be on Thursday, I don't know what the date is, Thursday, the 18th or something, so I'll have to approve the budget then.
Okay. Anything else on that?
No.
All right, and then next up is item 5, and that's 911 staffing update. We have Lieutenant Jeff Howard. And I think this is really just an update from the budget hearing or budget meeting that we've had in the past where this came up.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I was in here today just to kind of talk about where we're at with our hiring process, where we are with our overtime and our trainees, and then kind of give you a timeline for when we might be getting out of the weeds at least, as well as give you some ideas and some plans on what we have been implementing and what we plan on implementing in the future. Right now, we have 5 trainees in the program. One of them is beginning to wrap up fire med dispatching. That should be done sometime in October if everything goes well. And then she has law enforcement dispatch training. We're hoping to get her completely done probably by mid-June or mid-January to beginning of February. We have 3 trainees going through call taking training right now. So they're at the beginning stages of training. They should be done in October, and then hopefully we'll have enough trainers to be able to train them in fire med dispatching to get them at least on a radio channel by February. And then the hope is to have them completely done by probably May or June of next year. And then we have another one that is still in classroom, so he's a lateral, and hopefully we can get him done, if we can dedicate the training hours for him, April or May of next year. We have 5 people in backgrounds right now. One of them is scheduled for a chief's interview. 3 more have polygraphs and psychological exams scheduled in the next 2 weeks, so hopefully they'll be starting mid-October. Although that's good news, it's also bad news because I don't have stations for them to train on, nor do I have the trainers to train them. So there's going to be a lot of sitting and learning by osmosis before I can actually dedicate training time to get them fully trained up and helpful. But if all goes well, July of next year, if we can get them the hours that they need dedicated, July is kind of my hopeful date for getting them out. Right now we are eliminating on-call. That's just so that I can dedicate days off for them. Again, they're working 5 days a week, 12-hour shifts just to maintain minimum staffing. So we've eliminated on-call. Our CTOs, our training officers are training on their off days here and there, not very often, but the requirement is just there. They understand. They're doing a lot of work on the back end to get as many of these people through training as possible. So in order to try and ease some of that burden, there's some programs that I'm waiting to hear back from the companies on. I got a quote from them recently. I got them down to what I believe is a reasonable price. It's about 40% of what they contract, what they advertise at. So, but before I hear a little bit more, I'll bring it before you guys to see what you think about that. But it will essentially allow us to train new people without a trainer being in the room with them. We are looking, because I've limited the amount of vacation that they're allowed to burn, I'm looking at potentially anywhere from 19 to 80 hours of overtime or of vacation hours that they will not be able to burn. So I will be coming to the board asking for a potential buyout of vacation hours in the near future by the end of the year. I just want to know the exact number before I come to you guys. We're also implementing some overtime from deputies. Next week, we're going to start hosting classes for them. They're short classes. They're not going to learn how to handle 911 calls. They're not going to need to learn how to dispatch for fire med. It's just handling the county channel. They have been talking on it for their entire career, so we feel like they should be able to dispatch for them in a limited capacity. And that is just to offer relief for the dispatchers so that they can get some additional time off at the beginning or the end of their shifts. That's 4 shifts a day from now until January. It should be somewhat budget neutral. I need to get in front of Brandy to get the exact cost of that. But the intent is a dispatcher will go home and then a deputy will come in. As of last week, you guys approved the contract for Rapid SOS to do automated call taking. I'm still waiting to hear back from them and their implementation team to get that going, but I'm hopeful that we can have some big strides for that at the end of October, if not fully implemented. And then this other company that I mentioned earlier, they offer AI-based software that will help hire, train, and then do quality assurance. Something that we are lacking right now is quality assurance. With our staffing levels, it has always been one person's job. They can't do it. They're being pulled in too many directions right now. So we have to do something, and this program will do a lot of that and provide us a report, a very detailed report about what our failures are and where we need to train more as a center. So it'll allow a very limited amount of time per week to focus on quality assurance. That's kind of where we're at right now.
A question for you. What's the average dropout rate for 911 trainees?
For us,
Yes.
it's probably 40%. And that's nationally pretty on point with every other center that I've talked to. A lot of people see on the movies about what they do and they think it's just answering a phone call, and then the moment they're trying to give CPR instructions to a mom because their infant isn't breathing, they can't handle the stress. And that's one of the things that this other company for hiring, they actually put them through animated calls with stress, and then it helps judge their ability to handle that kind of response. So it allows not only the center to look and see, hey, are they going to be able to handle that kind of stress when it's presented to them? It also gives the applicant a realistic idea about what it is that the job entails.
Any other questions? Lieutenant Howard, thank you so much for the update.
Yeah, of course, thank you for all the support.
Just
It's
let
been
us, yep,
It's been noticed and appreciated, so
let us know what we can do.
we'll do.
Thank you. Okay, next up is public comment. Would anyone like to speak? Come on down.
I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Hartman for the record. I'd like to go over this map a little bit. Too bad Commissioner Duncan left, because I want to challenge her when she says that any of the Hayden additional force is going to help us in the county. Look down here where Harrison is at. I was down there over the holiday weekend. I spent the entire afternoon there on Saturday. They had a band in the park. The marina was full. The town was full. The bars were full. I saw plenty of people in there that had no business driving. And yet I saw no sheriff's car at all. I timed it from the Wolf Lodge exit on the interstate down to Harrison is 45 minutes. Now, with that many people drinking on a holiday weekend between the marina and the bars, it was really lucky in my mind. I saw people in there that could barely walk, and they were going to drive. And we know what type of road that is that they're driving on. And yet you got a commissioner here saying that the rest of the county is going to benefit from Hayden. I'd like to see the data to support that comment. Now, what I did see down there in One Shot Charlie's, which was packed, and people were having more than one shot, the Coeur d'Alene Tribe Police did have one officer that showed up. I don't know what his authority is there. That's not on the reservation. He was there a few minutes, walked through the bar, and then left. But it seems possibly that maybe the sheriff's office needs to work out some kind of arrangement with the tribe, because they seem to be a whole lot closer than where the sheriff department is and where the city of Hayden is at. I've also made the comment in the past that I've had to make a 911 call, and I live down here in Zone 4, and I'm not even all the way down here. Took 45 minutes for him to show up. Now, there are a lot of homes on this lake that are paying a lot of property tax, including myself. And I don't think we're being equally represented when I see what Hayden's getting away with. And they need to pay to play. And this deal that, and the other part I don't understand is these school resource officers. There's no school over the weekend or over the holiday. There's no school during the summer. There's no school on the weekends. What do these school resource officers do then? And I'm sure they're drawing the same pay as the other guys that are out there. What do they do all summer? They get a vacation like the teachers? I've commented before, I've talked to the assistant deputy, all right, that school counselor salary is $45,000. And that deputy, the second over the whole Coeur d'Alene School District, is willing to work with you commissioners and with the sheriff to see what type of additional coverage maybe the school resource or the counselors could do that could free this up. Those school resource officers are extremely expensive for what I think we're getting for that service. The amount of time they put in for that service.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing nothing, 11:27 a.m.